Most people believe power comes from action, decisions, pressure, intervention. When something feels out of control, the instinct is always the same. Do something, act faster, speak louder, push harder. This instinct feels natural. It also destroys systems. Wu Wei begins with a diagnosis that most philosophies avoid. Action is often the problem. Not because action is wrong, but because forced action creates resistance. The more pressure you apply, the more energy the system spends pushing back. This is not spirituality, it is mechanics. Wu Wei does not mean doing nothing. It means not acting against the nature of the situation. In Western thinking, control is demonstrated, authority is visible. Power announces itself through movement. In Wu Wei, power is effective precisely because it is invisible. When Laozi describes the highest form of leadership, he does not describe commands or dominance. He describes a ruler whose presence is barely noticed, yet everything functions. This is deeply unsettling to systems built on compliance, because Wu Wei removes the performance of power. Most hierarchies depend on one thing: the constant display of control. Orders must be given, decisions must be seen, authority must be felt. Wu Wei breaks this loop. Instead of imposing order, it allows order to emerge. This does not mean chaos, it means alignment. Wu Wei assumes that systems already contain their own logic. Interference distorts that logic. The more complex the system, the more fragile it becomes under force. This is why Wu Wei appears passive to those who misunderstand it. But passivity and restraint are not the same. Passivity avoids responsibility. Wu Wei absorbs responsibility without rushing to assert dominance. This is where the philosophy becomes dangerous. A person who does not rush to act cannot be provoked easily. A leader who does not react immediately cannot be manipulated through urgency. Wu Wei neutralizes one of the oldest tools of control: pressure through time. Deadlines, crises, manufactured urgency. These force reaction. Reaction produces mistakes. Wu Wei delays action until action is unavoidable, and then applies it with precision. In modern terms, Wu Wei is a symmetry. Others exhaust themselves acting. You remain still, observing. Others reveal intentions through overreaction. You collect information without exposure. This is not moral superiority. It is strategic patience. Wu Wei does not seek victory through domination. It seeks inevitability. When action finally occurs, it feels less like force and more like consequence. This is why Wu Wei cannot be reduced to calm or peace. It is a philosophy of timing. Act too early and you create resistance. Act too late and you lose leverage. Wu Wei exists in the narrow space between those two eras, and that space is invisible to people addicted to movement. Power does not disappear when you stop acting. It becomes harder to detect, and what cannot be detected is much harder to oppose. Western philosophy treats control as something external. Power is exercised outward. Order is created through enforcement. From law to management, from politics to psychology, the assumption is always the same. Systems behave only when they are directed. Wu Wei begins by rejecting this assumption. Not emotionally, structurally. Wu Wei assumes that most systems collapse not from lack of control, but from too much of it. When control is applied continuously, systems lose their ability to self-correct. They become dependent. This dependency is mistaken for stability. In Western models, leadership is visible. Decisions are announced. Actions are broadcast. Visibility is equated with effectiveness. Wu Wei sees visibility as a liability. The more visible control becomes, the more resistance it generates. Resistance does not always look like rebellion. More often, it looks like inefficiency, delay, sabotage, or quiet disengagement. Wu Wei works in the opposite direction. It removes the signal of dominance. When no force is applied, there is nothing to resist. This creates a vacuum, and vacuums reorganize systems. In Wu Wei, leadership does not intervene constantly. It sets conditions. Instead of commands, it creates constraints. Instead of pressure, it shapes direction. This is difficult for Western minds to accept because it feels like loss of authority. But Wu Wei does not reduce authority. It distributes responsibility. When people are not pushed, their choices become visible. When urgency is removed, true priorities surface. Wu Wei exposes what constant pressure hides. This is why Wu Wei is incompatible with bureaucratic control. Bureaucracy survives through continuous intervention. Forms, approvals, supervision, enforcement. Remove intervention, and the structure reveals its weakness. Wu Wei allows weak systems to fail quickly and strong systems to stabilize naturally. This is not mercy, it is efficiency. In psychology, this appears counterintuitive. Western psychology often treats discomfort as something to be managed immediately. Anxiety must be reduced. Conflict must be resolved. Tension must be released. Wu Wei delays resolution. It allows tension to exist until it reveals its source. Most problems dissolve when they are not fed attention. Others grow until they become obvious. Wu Wei does not prevent outcomes. It prevents premature action. Premature action is the root of most failures. Intervening before understanding creates complexity without clarity. Wu Wei prioritizes observation over reaction. This is where Wu Wei intersects with power. Reaction is predictable. Non-reaction is not. A system that cannot predict response loses its leverage. This is why Wu Wei appears threatening to authority. Authority depends on expectation. Rules only work when reactions are consistent. Punishment only works when it is anticipated. Wu Wei introduces uncertainty, not chaos, uncertainty. When authority cannot predict response, it must either escalate or withdraw. Both options are costly. Wu Wei forces systems to reveal their limits. Either they can function without pressure, or they cannot function at all. In both cases, control becomes visible, and visibility weakens it. This is why Wu Wei is often misrepresented as passivity. Calling it passivity neutralizes its threat. But Wu Wei is not absence of power. It is power that refuses to perform. And performance is the currency of modern control. Most control does not begin with force. It begins with provocation. A stimulus is introduced. A reaction is expected. Once the reaction occurs, behavior becomes predictable. This is the foundation of psychological control. Fear accelerates compliance. Anger narrows perception. Desire overrides judgment. Modern systems are built around this sequence: trigger, reaction, correction. Wu Wei interrupts this sequence at the most critical point, between stimulus and response. Western psychology often treats impulse as something to be managed after it appears. Techniques are offered to regulate emotion, reframe thought, or suppress reaction. Wu Wei works earlier. It targets the need to react. In Wu Wei, reaction is not a reflex, it is a choice, and often an unnecessary one. This is deeply counterintuitive. From early childhood, individuals are trained to respond quickly, answer immediately, decide fast, react before silence creates discomfort. Silence is interpreted as weakness. Delay is interpreted as indecision. Wu Wei rejects both interpretations. Delay is not hesitation. Silence is not absence. They are tools. In psychological terms, Wu Wei is attentional sovereignty. Most people do not control their attention. It is hijacked by urgency, by emotion, by expectation. Once attention is captured, behavior follows. Wu Wei trains the opposite skill, withholding attention, not suppressing emotion, but refusing to grant it priority. An insult appears, a threat emerges, a demand is made. Wu Wei does not deny these events. It simply refuses to elevate them. Without attention, emotion decays. This is not philosophy. It is neuropsychology. Emotional states require reinforcement. They persist only when revisited. Wu Wei starves reaction by not feeding it. This is why non-reaction feels unsettling to others. They expect escalation. They prepare for defense or counterattack. When none arrives, uncertainty increases. Uncertainty destabilizes control. In negotiation, this is known as asymmetry. The person who reacts first reveals position. The person who remains still collects information. Wu Wei formalizes this into a life strategy. Do not reveal inner movement unnecessarily. Do not externalize emotion. Do not clarify position prematurely. Clarity in Wu Wei is internal first. This is often mistaken for detachment, but detachment implies withdrawal. Wu Wei implies presence without engagement. You are there. You observe. You do not collide. Psychologically, this creates a reversal. Those attempting to provoke reaction become exposed. They escalate. They overact. They reveal motivation. Wu Wei allows others to betray themselves. This is why Wu Wei is often described as soft. Softness here does not mean fragility. It means adaptability. Rigid structures break under pressure. Flexible ones absorb impact. Emotionally rigid individuals react violently or collapse. Emotionally flexible individuals remain functional. Wu Wei cultivates flexibility, not by eliminating emotion, but by denying it command authority. In modern environments, social, political, digital, this is increasingly rare. Outrage culture depends on instant reaction. Social pressure depends on visible alignment. Manipulation depends on urgency. Wu Wei opts out of all three, not by resistance, but by irrelevance. When reaction is not supplied, the system must find another target. This makes Wu Wei psychologically expensive to oppose. It cannot be argued with. It cannot be shamed. It cannot be rushed. And because it cannot be rushed, it controls time. Time is the ultimate lever of power. Wu Wei does not seize it. It simply refuses to give it away. Every system of authority depends on one invisible condition: predictable reaction. Rules work only when people respond as expected. Punishment works only when it triggers fear. Rewards work only when they activate desire. Control does not require force. It requires reliability. Wu Wei disrupts this reliability. A person who does not react on schedule cannot be governed through routine mechanisms. This is why Wu Wei is not merely philosophical. It is politically destabilizing, not because it incites rebellion, but because it removes participation. Most systems are not overthrown. They are exhausted. They collapse when the cost of maintaining control exceeds the benefit. Wu Wei increases that cost. When individuals do not respond to urgency, deadlines lose power. When they do not respond to fear, threats lose effectiveness. When they do not respond to validation, rewards lose meaning. This forces systems to escalate. Escalation exposes weakness. Louder rules, harsher enforcement, more surveillance, more incentives. Each layer reveals dependence. Wu Wei turns authority into a visible effort, and effort is always weaker than inevitability. This is why Wu Wei has historically been tolerated only as abstraction, as poetry, as metaphor, as Eastern wisdom, stripped of operational meaning. Because applied Wu Wei cannot be integrated into systems that rely on obedience. It does not confront authority. It does not resist it. It simply does not cooperate emotionally. This creates a paradox. The system cannot punish non-action easily. It cannot accuse silence convincingly. It cannot discipline restraint. Every response it demands only highlights the absence of compliance. Wu Wei also dismantles collective pressure. Most social control functions horizontally, not vertically. Shame, norms, moral signaling, outrage. These mechanisms require emotional contagion. Wu Wei blocks contagion, not by denial, but by non-participation. The individual who does not mirror outrage breaks the feedback loop. The crowd depends on resonance. Wu Wei creates dampening. This is why Wu Wei practitioners are often labeled as cold, detached, or indifferent. These labels are defensive. They reframe non-reactivity as a flaw to restore pressure. But Wu Wei does not aim to appear virtuous. It aims to remain unavailable. Unavailable to provocation. Unavailable to emotional leverage. Unavailable to manufactured urgency. In a world built on constant stimulation, this is subversive. Wu Wei does not fight power. It makes power inefficient. And inefficiency is the beginning of collapse. Wu Wei is not ancient. It is timeless. It reappears whenever complexity exceeds control. Modern systems are more complex than any before them. Algorithms, markets, narratives, social feedback loops. The faster the system moves, the more valuable restraint becomes. Action scales poorly. Reaction scales worse. Wu Wei scales indefinitely. It requires no resources, no organization, no visibility, only discipline. This is why Wu Wei does not create movements. It creates individuals, and individuals are harder to neutralize. Wu Wei does not promise victory. It promises positioning. The position of minimal exposure and maximal optionality. You act only when action is unavoidable. You speak only when speech alters outcome. You intervene only when intervention reduces complexity. Everything else is noise. This is not passivity. It is selectivity. In modern power dynamics, the one who reacts least controls the frame. The one who speaks last defines meaning. The one who moves slowest forces others to reveal speed. Wu Wei converts patience into leverage. This is why it aligns with no ideology. It cannot be branded, it cannot be mobilized, it cannot be enforced. It survives because it is internal. Wu Wei does not teach how to win arguments. It teaches how to avoid traps. It does not teach dominance. It teaches immunity. In an age of constant reaction, immunity is power. Wu Wei leaves no trace, no slogans, no institutions, only outcome. Things resolve without visible cause. Conflicts dissolve without confrontation. Pressure redirects itself elsewhere. And observers mistake this for luck. It is not luck. It is structural advantage. The strongest position is the one that does not announce itself. The most effective action is the one that feels inevitable. This is Wu Wei, not the absence of power, but power that no longer needs to prove itself.